Welcome to What is Next on GTV, the authentic and trusted voice of Ghana. What is Next is a very educative program, a program asking questions about contemporary challenges confronting us as a nation. But in the process, we look for people that we consider to be people with accumulated wisdom, people who are thought leaders of our nation at the moment, and get closer to them and allow them to share with us the relevant answers that they have for the questions that we are raising. And today, I'm happy to have with us a lady of many parts. She is a former director, Institute of Local Government Studies. But she is also a former chairperson of the National Development Planning Commission. And at the moment, by grace, she serves as the chairperson of the Star Ghana Foundation, and we may go on and on and on. And we need her to help us answer a question. A decade ago, we as a nation initiated a constitutional review process. The process attracted national resources, national interest, and participation. Even there was and there has been a white paper on the work of the Constitutional Review Commission with related legal issues. Now, a major recommendation in the Constitutional Review Report has something to do with moving the nation from a political constitution to a developmental constitution. And this afternoon on What is Next, I just want to welcome Dr. Esther Ofei Aboagye and humbly ask her to help us unravel what it takes to move from a political constitution to a developmental constitution. Auntie Esther, welcome to What is Next.
Thank you very much.
And I'm so grateful on behalf of my viewers. Now, what was the rationale behind the Constitutional Review Commission, the recommendation of moving our constitution from a political constitution to a developmental constitution?
Thank you very much, Papa. I am delighted to be here again and to answer or attempt to answer the question. The Constitutional Review Commission had a number of eminent persons who were charged with developing or undertaking that assignment. Years later, and Papa, I was vice chair. My chair was Professor Kwesi, from whom I learned a lot. But it was a defining moment in my career. I did learn a lot. But the point here this afternoon is that the Constitutional Review Commission did its work, handed over its report to the President of the land in December 2011. So it's a very exhaustive process, very instructive. If you look at the way, the care and the thoroughness with which they did their work. And maybe one day we'll look at the methodology again. And the report itself runs into well over 900,000 pages, very detailed. And as a Ghanaian and as somebody who was privileged to have to look at it again, when we attempted to develop a long-term national development plan, you can begin to interpret the theme of their work, which, as you rightly put it, moving from a political constitution to a developmental one within the context that they found themselves in. The 1992 Constitution has served Ghanaians well. It has served its purpose. However, it was formulated within a certain political context against the backdrop of years of, if you like, non-multi-party rule. Now, the perception is to equate democracy with multipartyism. And so there was the perception that that period, at least from between the Third and the Fourth Republics, where we had the AFRC and the PNDC in charge of Ghana, was a situation in which political development, situation in which participation and democracy was in short supply, that a lot of the governance in this country had been revolutionary, had been forced, and human rights issues were of concern. At that time, the pressure had mounted over the years on Ghana, especially when you have to be seen to be a country to do business with, because we don't have all the resources we need. That was a time when internationally, the international recession, the oil crisis, and then we as Ghana also found ourselves in a lot of economic turmoil, compounded with natural hazards. If you remember the early 80s, 81, 82, 83, and then also situations where Ghanaians large numbers of Ghanaians were turned away from countries they had migrated to, like Nigeria and so on. The country found itself in a lot of difficulty. At that time too, with issues of governance, issues of mismanagement, there was also quite a lot of brain drain. So we reached a situation where Ghana had a number of deficits, including the human resource deficit, which could have helped to turn the country around. So that we found ourselves needing to do business with the world. We found ourselves needing to go to the Bretton Woods institutions. Like many African countries, we entered into a period of structural adjustment and economic reform. So on the governance side, there was a lot of pressure. Externally, there was a lot of pressure from countries, from Western countries, from our would-be donors, and other important parties, that they wanted to see Ghana become democratic, to return to a multi-party arrangement where Ghanaians would have a choice in the government that they had. In that era, there had been efforts at enhancing participation of the people. Within a revolutionary context, we had gone through the People's Defense Committees, those kinds of arrangements. Even the decentralization model that we entered into was supposed to offer an opportunity for people to have a say in the kind of government that they had, bringing governance right to the doorsteps of the people, having people represent them. But it still was not enough. There was pressure from our external parties, but there was also internal pressure from professional bodies, associations, and so on. And so all of those events culminated in our returning to constitutional rule. So that if you take the constitution or the constitution that emerged from that process, Papa, you also recall that as part of that process, there was a lot of consultation culminating in a consultative assembly that looked at, reviewed, and endorsed the constitution that emerged. But if you pick up that constitution, you also realize that there is a lot of political heaviness in it, a lot of issues around representation, a lot of power vested in the executive, the president, for appointments, for approvals, and all of those kinds of things. You will find that in a number of places, that appointing authority is evident. There isn't as much emphasis on the mechanics or the technocratic aspects of development in that document. So the constitutional review body even put in a phrase that they wanted to move from the politics of democracy to the economics of democracy. that it's good to talk about power to the people and all of those kinds of things. But how are we going to mobilize the resources in ways that are sustainable, in ways that are equitable, in ways that actually result in growth and innovation? So they pose those kinds of questions, and you'll find that a lot of their recommendations then seek to move too much power from the president's appointing authority, too much power from political entities or political actors in charge of things, to more technocratic, more people engaging kinds of arrangements.
Yeah,
a rather long answer to a short question.
But for my viewers, if we want to find out the difference, what will a developmental constitution offer us that a political constitution will deny us?
Right. The constitution, there are certain parts,
maybe beyond appointment by the president.
Yes, there are certain parts of the constitution that are very critical, and we know all of the constitution is critical. But if you look at a certain portion like the directive principles of state policy, I mean, with all of the elements of it, the economic, the social and political objectives, these are things that Ghanaians are still relevant for Ghanaians to realize. But you see that some of the arrangements, and it has been borne out in 20 years of implementation, that they haven't been realized. For instance, let me get back to an entity like the National Development Planning Commission. I'm saying this because it should be, and its work, the work it was given, is the fulcrum around which national development should occur, or our growth and our change. The important word development, changing the situation of Ghanaians, should occur. Now, from the 1992 Constitution and the legislation, Act 479 for the organization, the Commission, and Act 480, which is the National Development Planning Systems Act, evolved, resulted in a situation where the commission is a commission. So, in a sense, the members of the commission are supposed to do more than just be policy guiding. They're supposed to provide some technocratic oversight to advising this country and getting this country where it ought to go. Even with the Constitution, it was envisaged that the economic planning dimensions of the work of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning would rest in this body. That's the National Development Planning Commission. And so the president appoints the chair, and appoints the commissioners. The Constitution and then the legislation made provision for certain key ministers, sector ministers, and government leaders, like the Minister of Finance, the government statistician, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, and all of those people, and other sector ministers to be members of the commission. And with an eye on political representation and participation, the regional coordinating councils are expected or required to nominate representatives of various regions. And in the rest, the president appoints as a number of people, who can bring expertise with that technocratic capacity. And what the constitutional review process recommended, the report recommended, was that the chair, the head of the commission, for instance, should not be a chair appointed by the president. The director general should, be the chief executive of the organization, and then the members will, from among themselves, nominate and elect a chair and a vice chair. All of these regional representatives, selected by regional coordinating councils, which are managed by regional ministers, would give way to regional planning officers as ex officio members. They also recommended that each political party should provide one representative with technical and developmental expertise, demonstrable expertise. And then they would have 2 representatives for organized labor, 2 representatives from private sector, 2 representatives from civil society. You see, so they gave more structure to this National Development Planning Commission in a way that would be more representative, but also more technically oriented, and also in a way that the fortunes of, the chairperson and so on will not rely on, whether that person is in favor or in political favor or not in political favor. So that in such an environment, you will find that the mechanics of development is what they will be talking about. The logic of development is what they'll be talking about. When we talk about monitoring and evaluation, the regional planning officers will then take whatever has emerged from the commission at the national level to look at their context.
Auntie Esther,
and promote,
you see,
that.
When we go to Makola right now,
Yes.
or Kejetia or Tamale,
Yes.
now the feeling is, and you hear this, every 4 years we vote.
Yes.
But after the voting,
Yes.
we see nothing.
Yes.
Our roads are not done.
Yes.
We don't do this.
Yes.
And so, is it a structural thing? Is it a constitutional thing? If after voter registration, exhibition,
Yes, yes,
voting,
yes.
and the people don't see the development they want to see,
Yes.
would we say that has something to do with the kind of constitution, the structure we have built for ourselves? Yeah, that's what the ordinary Ghanaian want to hear.
Yes.
After voting, I want to see development. I want
Yes.
to have affordable housing.
Yes.
But
Yes.
now we have affordable housing that people cannot afford.
Yes.
So why do I go and queue and vote only to find out that I can't even afford housing? So
Yes.
that's what people, my viewers, want to hear.
Papa, the question you have asked is a very complex one, but it is both structural, attitudinal, and managerial. What do I mean structural? If you go back to the Constitutional Review document and its recommendations, you'll find that they made a lot of recommendations even around restructuring Parliament. But the ways in which Parliament should work in a way that the executive doesn't seem to dominate, or overshadow, or overpower Parliament. They made recommendations around strengthening the judiciary, the various arms of government, which are not working with the checks and balances as effectively as should be. They made all of those kinds of recommendations as to what is able to percolate through and what people, and like I said to you, look at a situation like the National Development Planning Commission. Is the commission adequately resourced, human-wise, and in other ways, to be able to look at national development dispassionately, sequentially, innovatively, and in ways that can be sustainable? And it makes, for instance, recommendations around my own home ground, decentralization and local government, in ways that makes the assembly more responsive and responsible to the people that they purport to represent. It makes recommendations around traditional authority and the ways in which they are involved in governance. So in that respect, how do we get or give these entities the freedom to engage and contribute to development in ways that reward, not financial reward or rent-seeking reward, but in terms of being motivated to introduce change and contribute to the transformation process as should be? And we will continue to give examples as we go along. So those ones would be the structural ones. And indeed, Papa, elements of these recommendations have been taken on, and some of the reviews and the reforms, reflect some of the recommendations that were made in that report. But going on, I said to you that it's structural, it's institutional, but it's also attitudinal and managerial. 4 years, they vote, nothing happens, and then they go away.
Then another 4 years, they come again.
Yes.
And vote for us.
Yes.
We will give you this.
Yes.
You vote.
Yes.
You don't see it.
Yes. Participation, in a way, reduced to the elections, will result in what we find. What do I mean by this? You see, elections have been described as a blunt instrument of participation. You come, you convince me. I like what you're saying. I like the look of you. You tell me all kinds of impossible things, improbable things. Then I vote for you. And obviously, you can't do them. Or sometimes you'll find a situation where the people you have voted for haven't thought through the implications of the promises that they have made. They haven't costed them. They haven't even thought of the methodology by which they will operationalize what you say. Because you will find that a promise is made around local economic development. One person sees it being driven from the top. A structure where we descend on the localities, the markets, and so on, and give them factories, markets, and so on. Another person also sees it being driven from the bottom up. Let the people identify industries, activities that they would benefit from, that they can participate in. So even at the policy level, building consensus or building a unity of thought, of purpose, becomes very difficult, you see. And then we're going and we're coming and we're going and we're coming and we're going and we're coming, and then 4 years goes away. Secondly, because of we've a certain frightening cycle has emerged. The people see nothing happening. They are very cynical about elections as a process of getting the things they want. They see people who want to go into public office as people who are going to gain something that they will not have access to. They make demands. The people find the money and they find the resources and the inducements to induce them to vote for them. The people also get as much as they can. The people are voted for, they go away, and the next 4 years comes. A lot of our problems are not ones that can be solved within a 4-year cycle. They need a longer term approach and therefore a longer perspective, you see, so that we need to think about it and break them up as to what can be resolved over there. The politician has a 4-year time frame, mentality, scope. I mean, that's the planning frame. Meanwhile, the technocrat who sees that this road or this entire process is an 8-year process. We are planting, we are processing, we are putting it in. In the first year, we'll break even in the second, and so on. It's a longer term process because development change is a complex process. So there's that disjoint. There's that disjoint. Sometimes too, people don't want to be told that what you are asking for will take longer than you have to deliver it. They know that there are 4 years.
Are you sometimes worried about some of the promises that politicians give to the electorate?
I am worried by some of the promises that the politicians give to the electorate. I'm also worried that the electorate doesn't appear to have the courage and the capacity to question these promises. And I'm also worried by the fact that we don't seem to even want to question these promises. Because sometimes some of the things that you hear said, you ask, so how? You see, if we ask that question how more often, maybe politicians will be compelled to think through the process, you know. But very often we find that people are not ready. They don't have an answer. They don't have a process ready to operationalize the promise that they've made. For instance, if you stand as a parliamentarian and you say, I'll bring this, I'll bring roads, I'll bring industries, I'll bring hospitals, you know, how are you planning to do that? Because the roads don't lie in your purview. The hospitals that you will bring may not fit into the larger structural plan of the Ghana Health Service. So you run the risk of putting a hospital there that you won't have nurses to fill. You provide an industry where you haven't thought through the market for, along the value chain. You see, so sometimes some of these promises, they need to be understood. Now, if you go to, but the cynicism, the cycle that I was saying, if as a politician you go and stand there and say, as for me, I have nothing. When I go to Accra, I'll go and represent. The people will not vote for you, so they won't say it. So that becomes a worrying mess, so to speak.
Viewers, this is what is next on GTV, the authentic and trusted voice of Ghana. I'm in conversation with Dr. Esther Ofei Aboagye, and we are reflecting on moving our constitution from a political constitution to a developmental constitution, a major recommendation that the Constitutional Review Commission made almost a decade ago. Now, Esther, earlier on you mentioned traditional leaders.
Yes, indeed.
That system existed even before the arrival of colonial powers. They have worked with military and democratic government, as you mentioned earlier on. But how strategic has the traditional leadership been when it comes to enhancing local and national development?
Papa, traditional authority is extremely strategic. I believe that is one of the assets that this country has. And let me tell you why. If you look at the various assessments, including the Afrobarometer ones that CDD champions, you'll find that they enjoy moral confidence. They enjoy the confidence of the people, more than some of the agencies of state and so on and so forth. They've been with us for a very long time. They control natural resources. Our people trust in them. Our people value the, traditional authority system. In other parts of the world, or even Africa, traditional authorities are not as powerful as ours. Even though in West Africa there was a certain effort to meddle with it through indirect rule and so on, and they've been tampered with in all kinds of ways. I believe that the institution is quite robust, even though internally the institution has its own conflicts and difficulties. They are in a position where they can hold sway for our people. They have mobilizing capacity. They have moral suasion capacity. They preside over natural resources and the use of that, and other things. The face of traditional authority and chieftaincy is also changing. I mean, in terms of the fact that our traditional authorities are educated, they are professionals, they have access to diasporan resources. A lot of them have also taken up initiatives in social protection, helping young people, HIV/AIDS, environmental management and sensitivity, and so on. Very strategic. Now, our people need as much representation as they can have. It is true that they are represented by their MPs. It's true that they are represented by their assembly members. But sometimes they need non-partisan, reliable representation. Our traditional authorities have all the authority or the wherewithal to make the needs of their people known, to make the needs of the concerns of their people heard, to be able to stand their ground and say, my people want this, my people can do that. Our traditional authorities have done some, but I want more from them. What do I want from them? I want them not to wait for local authorities or even regional coordinating councils or national government to come and say to them, this is what we have done. I want them to summon them.
Auntie
I
Esther,
want them to summon
you are
them
sharing
and
your
say,
heart out.
yes,
This is a testimony and a
yes,
passion from the heart.
It is a very
this is a
passionate
cry that, and I just want you to look straight into this camera, because this is the time that the politicians are moving from one palace to another palace, and traditional leaders are meeting them, some as late as 10 p.m. What you are telling me, we don't know who is watching. Directly talk to somebody, especially our traditional leaders.
I'm saying to our traditional leaders, no, I beg you. You provide a channel for representing the needs and the interests of your people. At this stage, we want you to put these issues across without fear or favor. Sometimes, Nananom undermine themselves by undervaluing the power that they have, the social capital that they have, the moral suasion that they have, and move to one side or another, or take on a certain posture in which they are beholden to political authorities, are beholden to states. Very often in my work in local governance, Nanano will say, oh, the district assemblies, the chief executive and so on, they don't involve us. You can summon them. You can ask them to come and report to you, to come and share with you what they intend to do to your people, what is happening. You can ask them, what is this construction going on intended to be? What is involved? You can ask them, why is this happening where? Please don't be taken for granted. Please don't let it be a token involvement. It is true that some provision was made for their representation on the assemblies and so on. We need to go beyond that. They are on your land. They are managing your people. They are supposed to work in the interest of your people. You have the mobilizing power. You can exact more. You can represent your people's voice more articulately than has gone on so far.
This is what is next. And I'm in conversation with Auntie Esther, who is saying that our traditional leaders must articulate the need and the voices of their people. And she's calling for that. And I pray and hope somebody will hear, because this is the moment that politicians are walking in and out from our various palaces. And this is the time our traditional leaders must represent the voices of the ordinary people, even as they interact and engage with our various political parties. But earlier on you mentioned civil society group.
Yes.
Now, it is like, and this is an impression, I may be wrong, civil society groups are seen as key partners when parties are in opposition. But then when they are in power, then it's like civil society groups demand too much. Is that a fair assessment?
Baba, civil society should not be regarded as a homogeneous entity. Civil society is made up of several types of organizations that mediate between the state and the individual. So faith institutions are civil society. Traditional authorities are civil society. Media, civil society. Local producer associations, farmer-based organizations, market women's associations, welfare young groups are civil society, as well as your community-based development organizations, your NGOs, your national and international NGOs. They are all civil society. Now, we recognize, or increasingly, or since about 1990, when the discussion on poverty, democracy, and all so on going on, started a role, the watchdog role of civil society emerged, quite clearly. and the need for civil society to be able to advocate for the structural change that is required. Prior to that, civil society had been very active, first of all, in relief work. You look at the work of the Red Cross and all of those kinds. So initially, relief, dealing with disaster, people in problems, and so on. Then civil society became service delivery and development provision oriented, so that you see them digging boreholes, providing healthcare support, and so on. But it was also recognized that there was a need for advocacy, representation, articulation of issues, voice, policy analysis, and giving feedback, and so on. So the styles of civil society's engagement with government has also evolved. In some countries, faster than others, in some countries, slower than others. Now, in Ghana, that relationship between civil society and government has become less adversarial, or the style of advocacy has become less adversarial, less vociferous than it used to be in, say, in the 80s and the 90s. Over the period, civil society and government have found their, their levels, so to speak, in varying degrees. Because as I said from the beginning, civil society is composed of different elements and different styles and different levels of engagement. Now, when governments are in power, and like for instance, within this context or within this period, civil society has worked reasonably well because, for instance, around the SDGs, there's a civil society coalition on the SDGs composed of various entities around the various themes and goals. So they've given feedback, they've looked at the ways in which we have lived up to our commitments, and so on and so forth. It's been nice and cozy. And then again, on the supply side, government is also working to see if they can engage civil society. If you look every year around the budgetary cycle, there are invitations to civil society in various forms to make inputs. When there are consultations, they visit the chiefs, they visit the faith organizations, and so on. However, governments are defensive, and politicians have 4-year time frames. So when something ought to be done, some governments, some political actors have more appetite for criticism than others. Again, if you have consulted civil society beforehand, you know what their thoughts are, what their directions, what their proposals are, and therefore you can stand on that and implement them. Again, if you have a good relationship with civil society, it's broad, and you reach out to various elements of civil society, you will be able to check yourself before the problem becomes a problem. So the point I'm making here is this, that if civil society is engaged, or the various interest groups in an issue are sufficiently engaged before a policy is firmed up, you reduce the chances of forging or embarking on a path that will be will not be acceptable. However, that is not the way politics is done. That is not the way economies are run. There are varying interests, you see. And apart from the fact that civil society organizations are not homogeneous, civil society also have various interests. They have various incentives, various motivations, various influences, which could be coming from any side, including the links they have with their international partners, and so on and so forth. All of this has to be taken into account. That engagement must be had so that the various scenarios are anticipated. But when we don't plan sufficiently, even in our personal lives, when we don't plan sufficiently or something needs doing and we don't do it and we leave it to the last minute, it becomes an issue of crisis. So if you look in our personal life, there are a lot of crises which could have been prevented because we didn't take action in time. We didn't talk to the people we ought to talk to in time. We didn't have a discussion with the... so in all of that, and you can extrapolate it to the national level.
But Auntie Esther, you chair Star Ghana Foundation.
Yes.
At the moment, many, if not most of the civil society groups, media houses, attract resources, technical, financial resources, not just this year, how many years ago, from Star Ghana. Yes. We need very strong civil society groups for our development, for our democracy. Yes. But in terms of legislation, in terms of resource mobilization, how do you see, the civil society groups? Are they, if they are frustrated, are they justified?
You see, Reverend, civil society groups, are they frustrated at government and what government is doing? Because I would imagine that sometimes a position that, say, organized labor would take, or businesses, business associations would take, may be quite different from what development NGOs, for instance, would take. You see what I'm saying? And you mentioned Star Ghana Foundation. Star Ghana Foundation has tried to resource good ideas. You see what I'm saying? So when they come from, grassroots level, when they are big NGOs, sometimes we've supported organizations like the Pharmacy Council. In Star One, we had a relationship with the Ghana Hoteliers Association, the Ghana Journalists Association, a wide range of civil society groups, that we believe that this thing should be done in the interest of the citizens of this country. We supported that. What we want to foster is active citizenship. If you disagree with the course of action, the legislation, the policy, or something, give a good reason why, and we give you the platform and the wherewithal to articulate these aspects so that the decision can be very well informed. All the whole gamut, the whole array of inputs and possibilities are made available to policymakers. Look at, for instance, civil society stood and supported the Right to Information Bill very, very strongly. Civil society supported a host of anti-corruption initiatives. We have supported the Affirmative Action Bill to a certain point, where it's at, and so on and so forth. The point I'm making here is that we want to be able to give civil society the wherewithal, the opportunity, the voice, the resources to mobilize, the diverse voices, to access the people who would influence the policy making. And that also has informed our efforts to work with Parliament and also bridge the divide between Parliament and civil society, so that they talk to each other and legislations and policies will be influenced by this broad thinking. Civil society may be frustrated with government because government may go along the way it wants to. But that also reflects what Parliament says. The minority says we'll have our say and the majority will have their way. But the point here, Papa, is that if there is an issue, it must be raised. It must be put in the public domain. And it is also the responsibility of us as Ghanaians to keep ourselves informed and with our eye on the ball. Let me give an example. We started the discussion around the constitutional review process and its report. It's a very rich report. It attracted enormous donor funding. UNDP, the Embassy of France, UNICEF, Danida, they all made an input. It's there in the report. They supported it. Then at the end of this entire process, nothing happens. Nothing happens. So the taxpayers' money, theirs and ours because we've invested in people's time and so on. That investment, what has happened to that investment? A similar process was embarked upon in the development of the long-term development plan. Consultations, engagements, and so on and so forth. What is in that plan? And it's a very elaborate plan with an infrastructure. Whether the plan is good or bad, we owe it to Ghanaians to let them know what is in that plan.
And Esther, you mentioned active citizenship,
yes.
that civil society groups
yes.
must focus on that.
Yes.
Now, one of the biggest civil society groups, as you mentioned, is a faith-based organization.
Yes.
Do they have a role to play in working towards active citizenship? Maybe in a minute or two.
Papa, they certainly do. They certainly must do way more than they're doing now. You see, the beauty of faith is that Ghanaians are a very religious people. So every nook and cranny of this country, there are religious leaders there, be they Christians, be they Muslims, be they African traditional religion, they are there. And their people believe in them. And, you know, they can stand up and speak on behalf of their people, make their voices heard. They owe it to their people to understand what is going on in policy and in governance and explain it to them. They'll say, a lot of people will argue that secular and spiritual things don't mix.
You are not only academic, you are not only Star Ghana chair, you are also a religious person, a faith person, and either in the church.
Yes.
Now look straight to this camera.
Yes.
We are saying that you are saying that the churches also have a role, faith-based organization.
Yes, indeed,
you added Muslim to play when it comes to active citizenship. Please, maybe that will be your last word for my viewers.
Yes. My faith leaders, my papanum and my mamanum, you have a responsibility. Our people believe in you. A lot of Ghanaians have worked their lives around what you say and how you guide them. Jesus Christ came that we must have life and have it in all its abundance. Let us not hide behind the fact that faith and secular living should not coincide. That our church people or our leaders should stand aloof. You have roles to play. There are ways of saying things and getting things done. You have moral right on your side. You have influence on your side. Please get yourselves informed, involved, and engaged. Thank you.
Viewers, this is what is next on GTV, the authentic, trusted voice of Ghana. And I've been in conversation with Dr. Esther Ofei Aboagye, former director, Institute of Local Government Studies, a former vice chair of National Development Planning Commission, and at the moment she is the chairperson of the Star Ghana Foundation. And we've been reflecting on moving our constitution from a political constitution to a developmental constitution. A major recommendation in the Constitutional Review Commission report that was initiated a decade, 10 years ago. And she is calling traditional leaders, civil society groups, faith-based organizations to focus on active citizenship. Make sure we mobilize Ghanaians to know and pursue what we want together. But he also calling our politicians to be more mindful, especially the kind of expectation that we give to people, because the promises we give today will come back to haunt us tomorrow. My name is Kwabena Opuni-Frimpong. We will come your way same time next week, God willing. Until then, may God bless this dear nation, our homeland Ghana, and make Ghana great and strong. God richly bless you.